Good morning, everybody. Welcome to AP Live for European History. My name is Todd Beach. I teach AP European History at Eastview High School in Apple Valley, Minnesota. That's a suburb of Minneapolis and St. Paul. It's a beautiful day here in Minneapolis. We're excited to unpack the DBQ with you. Over 1,000 DBQs were submitted to us yesterday. So Katie and I were busy, and this is Katie.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, we got so many submissions of you guys practicing. You know, Todd makes such an effort to really reply to so many people, but I know we didn't get back to people today. So as we are going through these samples, please have a look at what you turned in and kind of compare it, because I know we weren't able to give everybody feedback. But we're really excited you're here with us today. Oops, sorry. All right.
Yes. Okay. So just quickly, this is where we've come from. That was the month of March and April, but I'm going to bring your attention to like the 10th, where we had our first DBQ practice. And then on the 13th, we went over feedback. Then on the 17th, we had another DBQ practice. And then on the 20th, I think it is, yes, we had feedback. Then DBQ practice number 3 on the 24th. And feedback on the 27th, then our 4th DBQ practice on May 1st, and feedback on the 4th. And then yesterday, it was lonely not having Katie here. Sarah and I felt that, but you had your virtual practice and did that to time. You submitted those responses, and today, here we are on the 6th. We're going to give you feedback. We have some exam strategies and reminders. We do have questions, and we will go through those. A lot of you have been submitting questions on and on and on. And so we've tried to condense that. We'll go through that. You're going to be with Katie tomorrow and Sarah, and they will give you another DBQ practice. And then on the 8th is our final day, and we'll go through some feedback. And we have some special guests we're super excited about. And this gets you all ready for that exam. Your exam day is the 13th. You guys are going to do great.
All right, so for today, we are going to go through feedback and samples from the DBQ you practiced yesterday with Todd. We're going to go through some logistics reminders to make sure that you are as ready as you can possibly be, and then do some exam strategies and some Q&A that you have been emailing us to answer some questions.
Great. So let's get into our warm-up. So this was our prompt yesterday. And, you know, so many times we get wrapped up in the minutia of how to do this that I want to take just a quick second. Let's just step back a minute. Why the DBQ? Of all the different testing genres, why the DBQ? And I guess I can't answer necessarily for College Board, but I can guess that, first of all, it's closest to most authentic thing that historians do, right? They put together ideas that they have about what happened in history. They explore different documents. They compose an argument. They use the sourcing and evidence to substantiate or support their argument. And while they're doing that, they recognize that history is complex, and there's a lot of different ways to examine something. And so this is probably the most authentic way that you can assess that kind of historical learning. But here's the other thing. As a social studies educator, what does this do? Sourcing it transfers to your adult life, right? You think about what's going on right now in our world, and you have lots of people on screens and in print saying one thing and the other. And you have to have the responsibility of a citizen to source that. What is truth? Where is that coming from? What's motivating it? And why are they saying it? And how credible is it? So this is just something, we're going to get into the minutia of the DBQ, but know that these skills transfer. It's so important to your adult life. All right, enough of that. Here we go. Our prompt was to evaluate whether the movement for Italian unification, it's fine, Katie.
Sorry.
The movement for Italian unification was more influenced by liberal politics or by conservative politics. When the prompt says evaluate, that means we're going to weigh the evidence and we're going to take a position. So here we go to document 1 with Katie.
All right, so we were going to take you quickly through the documents. We wanted you to have an opportunity to really look at them on your own, but several of these documents are from people that you would probably know from your lessons and with your teachers. This is Giuseppe Mazzini. He's an attorney from Genoa, exiled from Piedmont in 1831. This is his manifesto in 1831. And he says, "Young Italy is the brotherhood of Italians who believe in a law of progress and duty, and are convinced that Italy is called to be a nation and that Italy can make itself one through its own strength. The secret of Italy's strength lies in its constancy and united effort. Young Italy stands for the Republic and unity. Italy should be a republic because it really has no basis for existing as a monarchy. Unity because without unity, there can be no true nation, and without unity, there is no strength. So people started off right away using this as a document that's about liberalism and change, for sure. Todd, you?
Great.
Okay.
No, I agree. I mean,
Okay.
he definitely was publishing for what we would capsulize it as liberal, especially in the 1800s.
In the 1800s, yep.
Yep. Document 2 is the source is Vincenzo Gioberti, a priest from Piedmont, a publication titled On the Moral and Civil Primacy of the Italians, published while he was in exile in 1843. So right away, I'm reading the source line, and he's a priest. And so that is something I'm going to cue in on, especially a priest in Italy, as I'm thinking about liberal or conservative politics. I'm already beginning to think, I'm going to read it, but I'm already beginning to think this is probably going to be a conservative position. I believe that the principle of Italian association should be sought in what is concrete, living, and deeply rooted, that the Pope is naturally and should be effectively the civil head of Italy is a truth forecast in the nature of things and confirmed by many centuries of history. So yes, those two sentences kind of confirmed to me that this is definitely going to be a conservative position. The benefits Italy would gain from a political confederation under the moderating authority of the pontiff are beyond enumeration. Such a cooperative association would increase the strength of the various princes without damaging their independence. It would remove the causes of disruptive wars and revolutions at home and make foreign invasions impossible. That last sentence, with strength of the various princes and to make foreign invasions impossible, this does definitely speak to me as we are definitely looking at conservative politics, no change. We definitely want to hold on to the established classes. This is taking and Katie's dog is weighing in too.
All right, you do this one. I'm going to deal with it. Hold on.
No worries. Document 3 then is by Count. That should give you a hint too. If a person is titled Count, Camillo Benso di Cavour, politician from Piedmont, Sardinia, in a journal article in 1846. The settlement imposed on Italy by the Congress of Vienna was as arbitrary as it was defective. It was based on no principle, not even that of legitimacy. Certainly is not based on national interests or popular will. A democratic revolution has no chance of success in Italy. That's a very telling sentence, isn't it? Active power resides almost exclusively in the middle class and part of the upper class, both of which have ultra-conservative interests to defend. And that's a very telling statement there. All true friends of the country must recognize that they cannot truly help their fatherland except by gathering in support of legitimate monarchs who have their roots deep in the national soil. So I think this one speaks very loudly to conservative politics. And by the way, get back to Count. When we have that title Count, some of you recognize this in the reading your essays yesterday, but that means he's a nobleman. And so he probably is also probably going to be interested in protecting the status quo.
All right, sorry about that, Todd.
It's okay. You want to do the image?
Sure. And so here we have the image. This is Giuseppe Garibaldi riding into Naples on horseback in 1860, and the people are cheering around him. And this is also a document that speaks to change, right? He has come up from the South. People are cheering his arrival. This is definitely a document that looks at liberalism as influencing politics. You want to add anything to that, Todd?
No, it's a great image. I'm really glad we had that one in there. So yeah.
Absolutely. And then here we have Garibaldi again, and this is him representing Caprera in the Italian Parliament a little bit later, 1868. And he says, although old Republicans in principles and deeds, I and my friends accepted the monarchy in good faith and asked of it nothing other than it improve the conditions of our people. I leave it to you to decide what has been obtained from this government. My kind of representation is more revolutionary than parliamentary. So we had students using this document in both ways, and I think those were both really acceptable ways. The first was sort of focusing on this idea of revolutionary, that Garibaldi has brought change, But then some people focused in on the idea that they accepted the monarchy and recognized the monarchy as a conservative institution. And so depending on how the student used this piece of evidence to explain their argument, I think it was used well in both arguments. Do you
Yeah,
agree with
it's a
that,
good
Todd?
document.
Yeah.
It's a good document for this exercise because if students know Garibaldi, they read about him. We did him in the review, and he is very much a revolutionary. But we also learned that he compromised, right? And he came back into, because what he in the end wanted was a unified government. And so, you know, that nod to the monarchy in good faith, I think that's kind of a nod to that compromising.
Sure.
So it's a really good document for this exercise. All right, so let's get into our responses. These first one is from Auden at Knoxville West High School in Tennessee, and we're looking at contextualization and thesis. These are our samples. So in the green is context. The student is definitely going to, this response is definitely going to earn the point. And so it reads, after the Napoleonic Wars, Italy was broken up by the Congress of Vienna and largely handed over to Austria. During this time, ideas such as European nationalism were becoming more popular, and the liberal ideas of enlightenment continue to play a large role in European intellectualism. Elements of both these intellectual movements came into play as Italian thinkers began to strive for a united Italy. Liberal ideals of a republic pushed some of the early intellectuals towards popularizing unification. Auden, that's a very nice contextualization paragraph. Then we have this kind of transition in the purple, that pinkish purple. However, conservative nationalism, as well as political necessity, led to conservatism, ultimately playing a larger role in the movement. So we're transitioning into our claim, and the yellow is the claim. The movement for Italian unification was more influenced by conservative politics because while liberal ideas were early ideals, the movement ultimately needed to embrace conservatism to succeed politically. So we do have a line of reasoning. They have a because, and this is why. They needed to embrace conservatism to succeed politically. And so it does make the thesis point. I would really like to see kind of two very clear reasons, but this is all you need. You need to have a line of reasoning. You need to take a position, and it's really well done. Auden's essay was really well done, by the way, as well. So Knoxville West, well done. This is a response that earns the point for contextualization, but does not earn the point for thesis. So we'll read the green. Even when Italy started to unify in the early to mid 19th century, it is clear that the movement for Italian unification was through liberal changes. From all the different forms of unification that happened, Italy was unique. There were many powerful nations around it, like Austria and France, but also the northern states of modern day Italy were industrialized and the southern parts were agricultural. So that's pretty good because we kind of started out a little ambiguous. I wasn't quite sure if we were going to get some specifics, but then we definitely kind of honed it in. And so that's going to earn the point for contextualization. And then the response in the yellow does not earn the point for thesis, and we'll read that. With all the major changes that took place, like with Cavour in Piedmont, Sardinia, it is clear that Italian unification was a more liberal movement rather than conservative. So they take a position, but there's no line of reasoning. So if it is clear, then why is it clear? What is that line of reasoning? What are the reasons it's clear? That needs to be included. And so it would not earn the point because it's taken a position, but not given us a line of reasoning. And next sample.
That's one that we hope that maybe it gets fleshed out in the conclusion, right?
Yeah, that's one.
Yeah.
Immediately, I would go to the end and see if it's been restated in the conclusion with hopes that we have reasons there.
Sure.
And then this sample for contextualization and thesis does not earn point for contextualization and does not earn point for thesis. So in the mid 1800s, Europe was marked by a significant chain of events in different places, but with similar goals. Revolution. Few places were spared, but many were not. Italy was one of the places that did get inspired to have a revolution. And so I've just written on the side, response does not earn the point for contextualization because the attempt is entirely non-specific except the word Italy and maybe revolution. Yep. Let's look at the yellow. Although the revolution was fueled by different things, the movement for Italian unification was more influenced by liberal politics. So they take a position, was more influenced by liberal politics, but we have no line of reason. There's no because. So we really need that line of reasoning and the position to earn the point for thesis.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to show you some examples of we've been showing you this format, but some of you obviously just joined us yesterday and a really sort of simple format that we like for how students are using evidence from the documents to support an argument, right? So we're looking for those points that allow you to support. So this is Julia at Thomas Jefferson High School in Virginia. And Julia writes, conservatives influence unification because they believe that it could preserve the state and keep revolutions away. So there's our topic sentence with our argument. And then there's some attribution here. Vincenzo, a priest from Piedmont, believed that the Pope should be the head of Italy and these alliances would cause no revolutions and stabilize with a unified Italy. And then Julia brings it back to the argument. This shows the values in old practices and that the conservative ways would help stabilize things. So again, a brief description of the document with some attribution here, and then bringing this back. So this is a pretty, simplistic way. Didn't do a lot of analysis, but it absolutely works for using evidence from the documents.
And she's got a topic sentence.
And
yes.
and it's so important because you remember that the rubric says support an argument. And so we absolutely know what the argument is that you're making if you start the sentence with that. And I'm going to show you here, this is something that getting so many more responses yesterday that we really see that a lot of you are doing this. And I'm glad that you can read and understand the documents. But I know it's kind of a boring slide, but there's nothing going on here other than brief description about the document. So let's just go through this really quickly. You see there is no topic sentence. This writer has leapt into just talking about the documents and starts off, this is something that we refer to at the AP reading as laundry listing. So document 1 is a quote from Giuseppe Mazzini, written in 1831. He speaks about young Italy, progress, unity, and being a republic. Then there's this attempt at point of view here. The purpose of this document is to talk about how Italy should be a republic because unification brings them strength. So that is just repeating the content of the document. That's not a successful sourcing. Then moves on. Document 5 is about Garibaldi, explaining that he is more revolutionary than parliamentary. Document 4 is a picture of Garibaldi riding into Naples in 1860. Document 2 is by a priest named Gioberti, talking about how the Pope should be in charge of Italy. And document 3 is by Count Camillo Benso di Cavour, speaking about how for Italy to be unified, they need a monarch that everybody believes in. So there is nothing here that even indicates an argument. And we were really kind of concerned to see the number of people that approach the DBQ this way, not necessarily with all of these documents in one paragraph, but rather 2 documents in a paragraph with no connection to what they're trying to argue in the essay. And you cannot get credit for supporting an argument if we don't even know what your argument is. So Todd and I really, really want you to think about starting these paragraphs off with a sentence that relates to an argument that is related to the prompt, and then to bring your analysis of the document back to that argument. It's really not just for our DBQ for this year, but really for good writing. You should be starting off your paragraphs with a topic sentence that it makes it really clear what you're trying to write about in that paragraph. Todd, do you want to add anything here? Because I know we saw a lot of this yesterday.
Yeah, just, it's looks just like we haven't, this response says to me, we haven't done much of this work. So not all is lost. We have lots of videos that kind of unpack how we do this. And this video is something you could stop and pause and think about and look at our samples and get better pretty quickly if you just put some work into it, for sure.
Yeah, we have over a week. And if you went back to that calendar at the beginning, you can see that we do unpack this every Friday and go over it every Monday. So if you want to see some best practices for structure, then we kind of really encourage you to do that. So there's a lot of this sort of just clumping and laundry listing, and there's no argument. And you might have an idea what you're arguing as you're moving through these documents, but you need to make sure that we know what you're arguing. So just something to think about. I'm going to start off first with a response that does not get credit for evidence beyond the documents, because I want to contrast it with the next one. This person starts off with we see this liberal nationalism in document 4. So I have an idea of what this is going to be about. In the picture, Garibaldi rides into Naples to cheering crowds. People are gathering in the streets to see him. All right. This shows the popular support that nationalism was able to fuel in unification. Garibaldi, along with his red shirts, and then this person has indicated this is going to be evidence beyond the documents, was able to accomplish this incredible goal. So just as a reminder that the outside information cannot be just a mere mention or a phrase or a reference. It really needs to be developed enough to be relevant to the argument. So this is just like a quick name dropping and doesn't do enough to receive the credit beyond the documents. As we move into this more significant one, this is Anna from Pennsbury High School, who did a really excellent job with this one. And Anna starts off with a topic sentence: nationalism was an important liberal idea that influenced the Italian unification. Document 4 shows an art piece that depicts Italian people cheering while Giuseppe Garibaldi rode into Naples on horseback. The people are seen celebrating Garibaldi's successes at unifying Italy. Then we goes back and talks about the content and how it relates to the argument. Garibaldi was a nationalist and believed strongly in Italian unification. He believed in bringing the Italian people together under one nation. And in this piece of art, the people are seen celebrating this, showing the nationalistic spirit of the Italian unification. And then uses that stem here for evidence outside the documents. It was Garibaldi's nationalistic band of guerrilla red shirts that unified Italy in the South, liberating the kingdom of the two Sicilies, and then goes on to talk more about Cavour, who used realpolitik, a pragmatic form of politics, failed in his first attempt to join force with France to defeat Austria. It was nationalistic Garibaldi that took up his cause and continued to liberate Italy. So this is certainly more than a mere mention. And I think even if we had moved on just a little bit more, we would have gotten credit for outside information. And Anna's done even more than I think she has to here. So, but I just wanted to show you that I'm seeing a lot of people who think that just a quick reference or a quick phrase will get you the outside information. I think it's important that you stop and you develop that. Todd, do you want to add anything to that?
Just, that's a really nice paragraph, Anna. So you can see the structure to the paragraph. We've got the topic sentence. We've described what's in the document. There's a student brings in their own explanation of what's happening, and then is going to link that to this outside piece of evidence that's developed really, really well. So yeah.
So please, see the difference and stop and be deliberate about your evidence beyond the documents. There are 2 points available for you to get those. So don't just do a quick reference or mention. Stop and really give yourself a minute to develop it.
Here is our first sample, sourcing sample in the D category. This response from Henry at Memorial High School in Wisconsin. And we begin with a topic sentence: because of an emphasis on the importance of a monarch, the unification was more conservative. Okay, I definitely understand the argument Henry is making. In an article by Count Camillo Cavour, Sardinia Piedmont politician, that's our attribution line, Cavour states, and then we have this long quote: active power resides almost exclusively in the middle class and part of the upper class, both of which have ultra-conservative interests to defend. All true friends of the country must recognize that they cannot truly help their fatherland except for gathering in support of legitimate monarchs who have their roots deep in national soil. So it's a long quote from the document, and I'm just adding on the side there that a description would suffice and it would save you time. All the readers know the documents really, really well because they read them and they're reading essays all day. So just as you think about this for all students, the piece out of that you probably want to focus on is that ultra conservative piece. And so just a quick description would be something that would help you, because a lot of you are worried about time. Okay. And in the yellow, we have an explanation of the source's purpose. Cavour's purpose here is to convince more liberal people in favor of unification, to see why it is important that Italy is unified under a strong leader. Then the sourcing occurs in the green. Since it is a journal article, it is probably meant for the educated middle to upper classes, some of whom probably would have been sympathetic to the more liberal Republican causes. This is important because I love that stem. It shows how Cavour's later successful attempts at unification were always intended to be more conservative leaning. Cavour's unification was always influenced by conservative politics, and thank you for the document citation. So this works as a sourcing analysis for audience, right? And I really appreciate the document citation at the end because we've worked on this, we've brought in the document, and just signals to yourself as the writer, it signals to the reader, okay, I'm kind of wrapping that up. I'm going to move on to my next thing. This is an attempt, the attempt's purpose, but does not earn the point. First of all, there's no topic sentence. This was how the paragraph began. Doc 2. This doc was written in 1843 by Vincenzo Gioberti, who was a priest from Piedmont. So that's our attribution line. Looks like my arrows are off just a hair. The purpose of this doc is to convey many benefits Italy would gain from a political confederation. That's a description. Then we have doc 3. This doc was written in 1864 by Camillo Benso di Cavour, who was a politician from Piedmont. That's again attribution. And then we have a description. Purpose of this doc is to convey that the reason the Congress of Vienna was not defective was because it's not based on national interest or will. So I thought the response was trying to attempting purpose analysis. However, I've written at the bottom, the attempts are merely a description of the contents of the document. To earn the point, the response needs to explicitly explain how or why the message of the source is relevant to the argument. Both attempts identify the contents of the document, but do not explain the author's purpose for writing the source as it explicitly relates to the argument. Okay.
Yep. And we get that a lot when you think that the point of view means the point of view of what the document says rather
Right.
than the author. So yeah, that's
Correct. I have two examples of complexity. So this first response is from Rachel at Round Rock High School in Texas. This is the third body paragraph of the response. It's part of the argument. It is definitely more than a phrase or reference. And Rachel writes, the Italian unification was similar to the American Revolution of many years prior, in that there were some reservations about becoming one's own country and others who believed that revolutionary action was right. They both fought for their nationwide ideals and eventually came out as a new nation, independent from outside control. While one began as a colony and the other was merely land that was a part of other nations, they both had their own senses of nationalism and wished to recreate their land into one under their own control. This does demonstrate a complex understanding of historical developments, the focus of the prompt, because it explains a relevant and insightful connection across time periods using evidence, thus earning the point for complexity. So Rachel, I'm going to give you props for this because often I see students attempt this type of complexity where they're doing a comparison across time and there's just not enough evidence there. They go, oh yes, this is like this, but then it kind of ends there. But what you've done is really developed a nice paragraph with relevant, insightful evidence that is all true. It's just really, really nicely done.
beautiful.
And then here's another complexity. This is from Joey at McGill-Tulane High School in Alabama. This is the third body paragraph of the response. It is part of the argument, and it is more than a phrase or reference. While it had some very liberal tendencies, it could be seen as very conservative as well. So we have a qualifying statement there, right? Joey is saying it had very liberal tendencies, but it could be conservative because his main argument was that it was liberal. And again, as I said, this is the third body paragraph, so we have a qualifying statement. This is shown through the constant push to keep the Pope in power. Gioberti points out that the Pope is already in power and they should keep it that way. Cavour states that a revolution wouldn't work because of the contrasting social classes in his journal article. While both of these could be adequate arguments, they come from very biased points of view. It makes sense that a politician would want to keep power and a priest would want papal rule. This shows that through the unification, there were many conservative thoughts by those hoping for personal gain, but the unification as a whole was very liberal. So, Joey, props to you. I think that's really nicely done. Response demonstrates a complex understanding of the historical development that is the focus of the prompt because it qualifies an argument by considering diverse or alternative views of the evidence. Thus, it earns the point for complexity.
All right, so we also have another full sample, and I know some of you are new with us this week. And if you're interested, I didn't put a perfect sample on this particular DBQ, but the one that we did last Friday, Todd did select a 10 out of 10 if you want to see that structure. But I wanted to show you this because it's something, if you've been with us through these weeks, that I talked about that is possible for sort of a time saver. So let's go through this. This is has contextualization. After the failure of Napoleon, the Congress of Vienna restored the conservative order and put legitimate monarchs back on the thrones. In 1848, a wave of revolution spread throughout Europe, fueled by the same liberal ideas of the French Revolution. Though these revolutions proved mostly unsuccessful, the ideas of liberalism were not gone and would later lead to calls for unification in Italy. All right. Though there were some instances of these liberal politics influencing unification in Italy, and now we've moved in yellow to the claim, it would actually be conservative politics that would influence bringing Italy together because there's this line of reasoning beginning of the respect people had for the power of conservative institutions such as the Catholic Church and the monarchy. So this gets the point for contextualization. That's definitely enough and it relates it to the prompt. And this gets the point for thesis because there is a stand made there, and it does follow up with a line of reasoning. And this whole essay is from Sarah at Forsyth High School in Georgia.
This is Sarah's first body paragraph. And so conservative politics greatly influenced the unification of Italy because many people were loyal to that conservative institution, the Catholic Church. That is our topic sentence that establishes the argument or claim. In On the Moral and Civil Primacy of the Italians, Gioberti confirms these conservative beliefs by arguing that Italy should have unification based on what is, quote, deeply rooted, and that is the Catholic Church. This is conservative because it champions the traditional values of the church and preserves the status quo by removing disruptive wars. That's a great explanation right there. Yeah, I really like that. As a priest himself, his point of view would naturally support a unification with papal authority. Someone who has devoted his entire life to the church would obviously support and champion its having authority, although it's interesting to consider this additional piece of information that despite the support of individual church members, the church itself opposed unification, and the efforts to unify were blocked by the papal states until Garibaldi captured Rome in 1870. Doc 2. So we do earn the point for sourcing there for point of view. The supports an argument in response to the prompt. Got that. The bracket on the bottom left uses an additional piece of evidence beyond the documents that is relevant to the prompt. That is absolutely true. This piece in here about the church's position itself is definitely beyond the documents and then linking it to the document. So that's really well done there, Sarah.
Okay, and then in the second body paragraph, Sarah starts off again with the topic sentence. Conservative politics also influenced unification by support of the idea of traditional monarchy, right? So that's really nicely done. This is strongly advocated in the journal article by Count Cavour. We've got some attribution there. Cavour dismisses the settlement from the Congress of Vienna, but not the signs of conservatism. Cavour explains that the interest of the privileged, the upper classes, will only be protected by a legitimate monarch, right? So that's the description of that document. His point of view as a member of the upper class himself, a count, skews his view, as it is possible that a democratic revolution would affect his own wealth and privilege. So that there we have sourcing again for point of view, which is totally fine. You can do point of view or any of those letters that we've been telling you about in HAP as often as you want. Naturally, he will support the monarch that preserves this. Then, though already a politician when he wrote this journal, he would later be the prime minister of Piedmont, Sardinia, a skilled diplomat who will ally with France to free northern Italy from Austrian control so that it could later be unified with the South. And then Doc 3. So Sarah didn't use that same stem about outside information, but this is a piece of outside information here that Sarah's woven into the argument that is totally relevant to the document and the argument itself. So gets the point for the supporting the argument with the document, another sourcing, and there's another piece of outside information that Sarah's included.
This is Sarah's concluding paragraph. Unification in Italy did not happen overnight. It was a complicated process that involved competing personalities and motives. The unification was influenced in large part by the conservative politics that were established in Vienna, but were then applied in Italy by those who honored the traditional institutions like the monarchy and wanted to expand and preserve it. Excuse me. So yes, that's a simple restatement of the thesis. That's awesome. So yeah, the whole score, we got a point for thesis, a point for contextualization. There were two pieces of evidence beyond the document or from the documents. Sarah used two documents. There was evidence beyond the documents. She had one in each of those paragraphs. There was sourcing, one in each of the paragraphs, and no points for complexity. So that's a really nice essay that's earning 8 out of 10.
Right. And so we had talked about saving time, and that was something that came up. And then I saw this perfect example of someone who had done almost exactly what we had discussed last week. So 2 documents and really a nice score if you're concerned about time, just one possible strategy that you might use.
So we're going to transition now into exam strategies, and we've been talking about time. For those that are kind of joining us for the first time, this is the structure we've been teaching. I want to point out to that kind of starburst on the right. This is not the only way to structure a thoughtful response. This is simply a suggestion. And so we've been answering some questions about, could I do this? Could I do this? And I'm trying to answer those as best we can. You should use the structure your teacher's teaching you for sure. But for those that were needing some direction, this is what we've given you. It starts with obviously reading the prompt, and then you see over on the right, we have this T-chart. So as you get the prompt and you start reading documents, you're going to have an A argument and a B argument. So the last one we just did, was it more liberal or conservative politics, right? And so you're always can set up kind of before the exam starts, you can set up your structure. You can have a T-chart ready to go on a piece of paper so that when you open that up, and you can do this with Katie tomorrow, when you open that up and you see the prompt and you start reading documents, you've got a way to start sorting them. So then we begin over on the left-hand side with that triangle. We want to begin with contextualization, start broadly, bring the reader into the time period. I didn't put it on here, but for those that have been with this whole time, we've talked about geosprite. Some teachers use Persia, some teachers use ice or spice tea, these different acronyms to get you thinking about what's the geographic context, what's the political context, the social context, the intellectual context, and draw from that to start building the contextualization, narrow it down to your thesis or claim, and have that be in your first paragraph. Remember that thesis or claim, as I pointed on the left, we have a thesis or claim and a because statement that establishes our line of reasoning. So think I got reason number 1 and reason number 2, okay? We'll build our first paragraph, our body paragraph, the first reason. We have to have the topic sentence that we've been unpacking for you. And you need to support your reasoning with 1 or 2 documents, okay? And then on the left, we've been using the acronym HAPPY or HAP and Y. And I know some teachers use HIP or HIPPO, and that's great. Use the acronym, use the sourcing mechanism that your teachers have taught you. But we want to try and source 1 or 2 documents in that first paragraph. And then over on the other side, think about what do I have outside evidence to support a claim? So if we just look at think about the full sample we just unpacked, we had a topic sentence, there was 1 document used, it was sourced once, and there was 1 outside evidence in that first body paragraph. And that was the structure that Sarah used for that 8 out of 10. Second body paragraph, we have a second reason with our topic sentence. Again, we're going to use 1 or 2 documents to support that. We're going to HAP it or source it. By the way, for those that aren't sure, when we say HAP, we're talking about historical situation or audience or purpose or point of view. And the why means why it's important, okay? So if you choose purpose, you have to not only describe what the purpose of the document is, but why that's important to the argument, okay? And then over on the right, to consider outside evidence to support the claim. So that's, again, the structure. Then we've been saying that once you get through those 2 body paragraphs, you have a decision to make. You can finish your essay, restate your thesis and claim, and maybe write some context going forward. It really depends on your time. How much time do you have? So you have a decision to make. You can try for a complexity argument, and we would place that in a 3rd separate paragraph as the structure we're suggesting. Make a complexity argument, support reasoning with evidence or documents or outside with either documents or outside evidence. Do I have time to source a document there? Do I have time to consider outside evidence to support my claim there? Okay. So this is just the structure that we're suggesting to help you on the 13th.
And, if you have time, I kind of suggest, guys, that you go back and you watch Todd walk you through him drawing this out on the last 2 Fridays. He's done that towards the end of the video. So you could just fast forward until you see him use the document camera, because I think he does a really good job of explaining this as he's kind of going through it instead of you seeing it all here at once. All right, so we also wanted to remind you about some best practices that you can do as you're writing, and about using, and I want to just kind of go through this slide. I'm not going to read you the paragraph, but I want to talk to you about what's on the left here. And that is, it's really important to use attribution and an in-text citation. And those are really good best practices, and we've been talking through them through all of our samples. But it's also, as you can see, it's part of learning to write well, and it demonstrates to the readers that you are considering the actual source as you are analyzing it. So number 1, introduce the source using the attribution stems, according to, or the statement by, or use the author's actual name, and then shared his or her perspective or their perspective. And so those are really good. And you can see here, according to Joseph Chamberlain, a British industrialist, this was a great example of just bringing that document itself into your argument. And then we want you to briefly describe the content of the source. Todd just pointed out to you that example with that really, really long quote. It doesn't have to be that long. I know some of you are really worried about time. So really just describing the contents in your own words briefly is enough. And then you can do the HAP, or again, as Todd said, the HIPPO, talk about the historical situation, the audience, the purpose, the point of view, and really important, explain why that matters, why that's important. And then here we go. Why does the HAP relate to your claim or argument? And I really like that this is important or this is significant because, and that forces you into really doing the analysis that is part of those points. And then conclude the paragraph. We've been telling you this for weeks now. The nice best practice is put the document number in parentheses, because then you're really sort of signaling that you're moving on to your next piece of evidence or that you're done with that piece of evidence. So this is a really nice structure for you to be following as you are using the documents in the DBQ. And this will not only help you to be a good writer, but yes, we're looking to try to get you as many points as possible. And this is a really nice way to make sure that you're including what's necessary to get those points.
Some students have been asking, if you can just go back a second, Katie,
Yeah.
some students are asking, do I have to do all 4 of those? And no,
No.
you choose which of those you want to use as your sourcing attempt.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely. It's a really good point. Yes, and if you tried to do all of these, you're never going to get through in the 45 minutes what you need to get through. So that's not necessary.
And then again, this is just a best practice and a strategy to help you with evidence beyond the documents, because the rubric provides up to 2 points for use of additional piece of evidence. Okay. And I know these 2 slides are busy, but we're just trying to, it's really the stuff on the left we want you to focus on, but we wanted to share an example of what that looks like on the right. So in the B paragraph, it has to be more than a phrase or reference. The outside evidence, the additional piece of evidence has to be more. And in the C paragraph, we suggest that you use these stems to transition into this. So evidence, these are just samples. You can make your own, but evidence beyond the documents could be considered. Number 2, additional evidence that supports the argument. Number 3, additional piece of evidence that is important. These are just ways to cue you, not only the reader, but cue yourself. What am I doing? Another piece of evidence. All right, that's what I'm going to bring in. It helps with you in your head as you're putting pen to paper and constructing on this response.
And Todd, before we move on, I just want to talk really quickly. A bunch of you have asked questions about this. There's no double dipping, so to speak, in these points. So students were asking if they had enough in the first paragraph, could they add additional pieces of outside information with their contextualization? And my answer to that is no. It is, do not put your outside evidence with your contextualization, because it's not the reader's job to parse out what you meant for each thing. So that really needs to be part of your argument. And so that needs to be, we're really looking for that not to be in that contextualization paragraph. All right.
Okay, we're going to get into Q&A.
Just going to go through some, sure, yeah.
You want to take the first one?
I will. The question was, I was wondering, for contextualizing the DBQ, how much do we need to differentiate from the topic given? Can things be happening during the same time? And the answer to that question is yes. The rubric says before, during, or continue after. So as long as you are not repeating the information that's already in the documents and you are giving fact-based contextualization that's relevant to the prompt, it does not all have to be before. It can be during, as long as you are setting up for your thesis and your argument in that paragraph. But no, it doesn't need to be different than the topic. It can definitely be connected to the topic.
Number 2, how do you use a document in a DBQ while not adding sourcing and while still analyzing and applying it thoroughly enough to mean anything? So I think Katie gave an example of that in the samples that we did. You can do a document, use it, and still not source it. And I think there's a good example in that Katie gave today. Yeah.
So go back and have a look at that. Just describing the content. You're not talking about that source information. That's okay.
Yeah. And why you're using it. How's it following your argument? Yeah.
Exactly. So when doing the happy analysis, can we use the same one in our DBQ twice, using POV twice, or do we have to use 2 different ones? No, and that got asked so many times, even though we've said it. You can use whichever of the 4 you want, however many times you wish. You can use the same thing. You can use only one. You can differentiate however you want to do it. It doesn't matter. That's your choice entirely.
Number 4, when you're done citing the documents, is it recommended to put the sourcing style you used after the document number, doc number, historical situation, or just the doc number? So it's really whatever your teacher is teaching you. Sometimes your teachers teach you to label that. And I think for me, I just want the students to put the document number, but I also know that when I'm in the classroom with our students, after they've written a DBQ, one of the practices we have them do is we have them go back and annotate and tell me what they're trying to do. And I think that's similar to what this is. So it's really up to you. If you want to put that in, we saw some samples of that. That's totally okay.
Please save that for last if you have enough time, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, exactly.
okay, so for the additional piece of evidence found beyond the documents part of the rubric, is it possible to use two pieces of additional evidence related to one document, or can there only be one additional piece of evidence per document? So that's a good question. My sense is that I would really prefer for there only to be more sort of one clear piece, but I have seen examples where people clearly, and they actually transition and they say, and another piece of evidence to consider, and they're continuing on. And I really think that that's okay too. Todd, what do you think about this?
I agree with you. Just be really distinctive that you're arguing. This is an additional piece. This is another thing to consider. You know, the language needs to be clear to the reader that I've given you one, but I'm going to give you another right here.
Yes, exactly. Because otherwise, again, it's not the reader's job to decide how much your one piece was and to parse it out into two. So just be very intentional about doing that. So several people asked the same question.
Number 6, how can we maximize our time if we're worried about not being able to complete a solid DBQ in 45 minutes? And I think we've given you some things to do in your setup, right? Have the structure ready to go. You can print out, or I would encourage you just to write them out because I think they stick in the brain better. What are my stems that I'm going to use? I can have my screen set up. I can have my ID number up on my document ready to go. I can use the T chart to help sort the DBQ documents and where they're going to go in the argument. So all these things, you should worry about that. But then Katie gave you a great strategy today about if you're just using 2 documents. And that was a great sample of Sarah's that showed us an 8 that she was able to do using 2 documents. So there's a number of ways you can maximize time and not feel like I got to use all 5 documents. I got to do all these things. So I think begin with that structure or that outline, which will really help you kind of think through how you're going to approach this task.
Sure. How specific does our outside evidence need to be to get the points? It needs to be very specific. This is not something that's get awarded for vague generalities. You want to be using absolutely concrete outside information. This is historical information. So my answer to that is it needs to be very specific evidence. You agree with that, Todd?
I agree. Yeah. And if you can, expand on it, why it's important, I think that's even better. So often we get the kind of name dropping that you talked about earlier. Yep. Number 8, do other poems, writing, and pieces of artwork count as outside sources? Say a piece by Dickens, if it's worked back into the argument well and even possibly sourced. Yes. In fact, we saw that in the Industrial Revolution DBQ. Didn't we see some Dickens, Oliver Twist stuff, I thought.
We saw Kipling in the...
Oh, yes, there you go too, yeah.
Yeah, so we did. We absolutely, but again, you don't just throw it in. You need to work it back into your argument. I like the way that this question was worded, so good. If we have time for 3 body paragraphs, one of which being a counter argument, do we need to include the counter argument in the thesis? No, you did not have to have the counter argument in the thesis. I just really think it's a very important best practice to transition from your argument and explain that you are bringing in a different side to then other than what you have already been arguing in the essay.
Yeah, and I agree. You need to have the line of reasoning, as we talked about, the counter argument. If you're thinking about it as you start writing, it doesn't have to be a part of the thesis, but you need to have the counter argument, kind of that qualifying statement when you get to it, because I think it's really helpful.
Yep.
Number 10, will I not get complexity point unless I do a similar way to your guys' structure? There are many ways to achieve complexity. And I know because we've had these email conversations with some of you about, well, my teachers taught me to do it this way, and that's totally okay. You should do what your teacher has taught you. We have just tried to give you a structure that we think has some flexibility in it, right? You've got a decision point. You can kind of say, well, I'm going to go here because I've got time, or the decision point says I don't have time. I need to complete. So no, our way is just one suggestion. It is not the only way.
Good. Is it possible to pick the wrong side of a DBQ? No, whatever argument you choose, it is your job to support that argument with evidence from the documents and outside evidence if you have it. So these DBQs are set up so that we will see two excellent essays arguing two different sides, and that's perfectly fine.
I think it's our last question. Is scoring based off how many points on the rubric a student can earn? I think the quick answer is no. I think when they talk about scoring, I think they're asking about how does this score on my one essay going to equate to a 1 through a 5 on the exam? And we actually do not know. So part of what you might want to do is that we're going to have a guest on Friday that might be able to give us a little bit more of that. But really, until we have all the scores done, and the statisticians then will start to break down the scores, that will then tell us, that will be where they decide what's going to be a 3, a 4, and a 5.
All right.
All right. For homework, this was our homework last time, so been Monday. So I just want to remind you to complete your exam day checklist. There's 5 steps. Do this, okay? And it's cb.org/AP checklist. Make sure you do that, okay? And the next slide. Think about your testing environment, right? So do you have siblings that are going to be running around the house? Katie has a dog that was barking, you know. How are you going to give yourself a really quiet room, remove from distractions, and get logged in 30 minutes beforehand, and make sure that you have everything you need, that nothing is going to run out of power, all those things. So think about your testing environment.
All right. So here we have again, tomorrow I will be with you at 11 o'clock Eastern time, whatever time wherever you are. We're going to do another virtual proctored DBQ. And then on Friday, our last day, we are going to give you feedback for that DBQ. We have some wonderful guests that are going to join us. And we're going to celebrate the fact that 1 week from today is the AP exam, and check out the time so that you know what time the exam is going to be. And then I wanted to do some shout outs. The first one is Ridgeline High School in Millville, Utah. They are the Riverhawks. And then Yulee High School in Yulee, Florida. And I'm going to be honest, I have never heard of Yulee, Florida before. And I have lived in Florida my whole life. And they are the Hornets, and Hornets are in the news these days. So wanted to mention them. And then this was really interesting. Glenbrook North High School in Northbrook, Illinois. They're the Spartans. But they have this mascot that they call Sparty Jones. And maybe somebody from Glenbrook can email us next time and let us know. I don't know what that means, Sparty Jones, if they named their particular Spartan that is at their school. So guys, thank you again for always continuing to send us your work. And we're looking forward tomorrow to having one more full DBQ practice before the end of this. Todd,
Yep. These are just important links that College Board wants us to pass along to you, so that you can check those out. Exam day checklist is really important. If you're really nervous about, do I have everything I need? There's going to be something at those links that will help get you prepared.
All right. And this is the last slide we want you to look over. Just make sure that you've done this. Try the demo. We know we kept you really long today, but hopefully you'll be ready for this full practice tomorrow. And we appreciate you.
Hey, everybody, thank you so much for watching. We really hope that that was helpful. We spent a lot of time going through a lot of essays, pulling those samples. So we hope that there's something good in there that helps you, okay?
All right, guys, take care. We'll see you tomorrow for one more chance to practice. Bye-bye.
Bye.